Most people think they understand tornadoes, spinning funnel, dark sky, run for cover. But here's what they don't tell you. The Enhanced Fujita scale, the system scientists use to measure tornado intensity, explained in neat little categories from EF0 and EF5, was never designed to capture the full picture. It was designed to measure damage. And damage, it turns out, has a ceiling. Tornadoes do not. This is the story of what happens at the edges. The cases that made engineers uncomfortable. The storms that left researchers standing in debris fields, scratching their heads, because what they were looking at didn't fit the scale they brought with them. This is where the science gets strange, and the questions get harder than the answers. To understand why any of this matters, you need to understand what the EF scale actually is. It's not a wind speed measurement in real time. It's a damage assessment tool. After a tornado passes, engineers walk the path and look at what survived, what collapsed, and what simply ceased to exist. From that forensic evidence, they work backward to estimate wind speeds. The scale runs from EF0, which produces cosmetic damage like lost shingles and downed branches, all the way up to EF5, which produces something closer to total erasure. Entire homes ripped from foundations, steel beams snapped, pavement peeled from roads. The kind of aftermath where forensic teams struggle to confirm where specific buildings once stood, because there is simply nothing left to confirm it with. That's where EF5 lives, at the edge of what the scale can describe. And for a long time, that felt like enough. It felt like a ceiling. It wasn't. In May 1999, a tornado moved through the Bridge Creek and Moore areas of central Oklahoma. Storm chasers were on it. Doppler radar was trained directly on the circulation. And when the data came back, the number it returned was 302 miles per hour. The highest wind speed ever directly measured in a tornado, recorded in real time by mobile Doppler radar at ground level. The storm was rated EF5 because EF5 is the highest category on the scale. But 302 miles per hour is not just an EF5 wind. It is something beyond what the scale was built to describe. The damage it left behind confirmed that. Entire neighborhoods in Moore were not just destroyed, they were atomized. Survivors described watching houses across the street vanish mid-rotation, not collapse, not blow apart piece by piece, but disappear in a fraction of a second, like they had been subtracted from the landscape. That storm is the reason the conversation about EF6 exists at all. Not as an official category, not yet and possibly never, but as a question that won't go away. If the scale ends at EF5, and a tornado produces wind speeds nearly 100 miles per hour beyond what EF5 requires, what exactly are we calling it? The honest answer is that we're calling it EF5 because we don't have another name. And some researchers think that's a problem worth taking seriously. The argument against extending the scale is straightforward. At a certain point, everything is destroyed. An EF5 and a hypothetical EF6 would leave behind the same debris field, the same scoured foundations, the same absence where a community used to be. If you can't differentiate the outcomes, the argument goes, you don't need a new category. The damage surveys would look identical, but the argument for extension is equally compelling. If radar can measure a wind speed that exceeds the scale's upper threshold, then the scale is incomplete by definition. Science is supposed to reflect reality, not stop short of it for the sake of tidiness. And there's a practical dimension too. If engineers and emergency planners believe EF5 represents the worst possible tornado, they design shelters and infrastructure to survive EF5 conditions. A storm that produces winds 80 or 100 miles per hour beyond that threshold would compromise structures that were certified to hold. Underground shelters have depth and reinforcement ratings. If those ratings were calibrated against a scale that artificially caps at EF5, then the people inside them are operating on incomplete information. This is not a theoretical concern. It is a design question with real consequences. And then there are the historical cases that make the whole debate even more uncomfortable. The tri-state tornado of 1925 traveled 219 miles across Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. It moved at speeds of up to 73 miles per hour, faster than any tornado on record for continuous forward motion. It killed nearly 700 people. It leveled entire towns so completely that survivors reported walking through areas they had lived in their whole lives and being unable to identify a single landmark. By modern damage assessment standards, portions of that storm's path would almost certainly rate EF5. But the storm existed decades before Doppler radar, before modern building codes, before forensic wind engineering as a discipline. What its actual peak wind speeds were is something we will never know with certainty. The evidence is gone. The structures it hit no longer exist. The witnesses are no longer alive. The 2013 El Reno tornado sits in a similar uncomfortable space. It remains the widest tornado ever recorded, measuring 2.6 miles across at its peak. It killed several experienced storm researchers who were among the most knowledgeable tornado scientists in the world. People who had spent careers studying these storms and understood the risks better than almost anyone. The El Reno tornado moved in ways that defied expectation, shifted direction suddenly, expanded rapidly, and produced conditions that even the people chasing it could not fully anticipate or model in real time. It was rated EF3 based on the damage in the areas it crossed, because much of its path moved over open farmland where there were no structures to assess. But the circulation it contained, the wind speeds measured within its multiple vortices, told a different story. A storm that wide, rotating that violently, does not produce EF3 winds. The scale gave it an EF3 because that's what the damage evidence supported. The actual physics of the storm suggested something considerably more extreme was happening inside it. That gap between what the damage record shows and what the storm was actually doing is one of the most unsettling aspects of how we measure tornado intensity, explained through a damage-based framework. The scale can only tell you what a tornado did to the things it encountered. It cannot tell you what the tornado was capable of in the spaces between those things. And that limitation becomes even more significant when you consider how many violent tornadoes have tracked across open land, over water, through uninhabited terrain, never encountering a structure of any kind. A tornado can produce winds of 300 miles per hour over an empty field and walk away with an EF0 rating because there were no indicator structures in its path to assess. It sounds absurd, but that is how the system works, and it is a known and acknowledged gap in the methodology. The people who designed the Enhanced Fujita scale knew this. They weren't trying to create a perfect measurement system. They were trying to create a practical one, something that could be applied consistently by damage survey teams working in chaotic post-storm environments with limited time and resources. For that purpose, the scale works well. It has standardized the assessment process. It has given meteorologists and engineers a common language. It has made it possible to compare storm damage across different regions, different building types, different eras. Those are real and significant achievements. But the scale was never meant to answer the question that sits at the edge of all this. How strong can a tornado actually get? What is the true upper limit, if there is one? The atmosphere is not required to respect the boundaries of our classification systems, and it has shown repeatedly that it has no intention of doing so. Some researchers believe the answer lies in improving real-time measurement. Mobile Doppler radar has already pushed the boundaries of what we can detect during an active storm. Future technology may allow for more precise, more comprehensive wind speed mapping at multiple levels of the tornado simultaneously, capturing not just the peak gust at one point, but the full three-dimensional wind field across the entire circulation. That data would change everything. It would give us a picture of tornado intensity that doesn't depend on what happened to be in the path. It would tell us what the storm was actually doing, not just what it left behind. Until then, the conversation about EF6 remains exactly where it started, in a gray zone between confirmed science and uncomfortable possibility, a space where the data points in one direction and the official classification system points in another, and the gap between them represents something the scale was never designed to close. EF0 and EF5 give us a framework. They give us language, structure, a way to talk about the difference between a tornado that peels shingles and a tornado that erases neighborhoods. That framework is valuable. It has saved lives. It shapes how shelters are built, how warnings are issued, how communities prepare. But the tornado that produced 302 miles per hour over Moore, Oklahoma, didn't check the scale before it arrived. The El Reno tornado didn't constrain itself to a width the models expected. The tri-state tornado didn't stop at the edge of what our instruments could have measured. Nature builds what the atmosphere allows, and the atmosphere, as it turns out, is under no obligation to stay within the categories we've created for it. The scale ends at EF5. The tornadoes don't. If that kind of question keeps you up at night the way it keeps us up, subscribe, because we're just getting started.